All right, let's jump right in. When I say chemical safety, what pops into your head? For most of us, right, it's that bright yellow spill kit. The one tucked away in a corner. But here's a thought. What if I told you that the moment you even think about reaching for that kit, you've already lost?
And this right here, this quote is the absolute core of what we're talking about today. It totally flips the script on how we should be thinking about chemical management. See, the cleanup, that's the last desperate line of defense. It's not the plan. It's the proof the plan failed.
So that begs the question, right? If the spill kit isn't the most important tool, then what is? And the answer, well, it's not something you can buy or put on a shelf. It's bigger than that. It's a mindset. It's a system. And really, it's a culture.
Which brings us to what I like to call the spill kit paradox. When I was starting out, I was absolutely obsessed with having the perfect, most detailed response plan. I could react to anything. I thought I was a superstar. But the truth is, I was failing at what really mattered: leading. It took me a while to learn that real leadership in this space isn't about being the fastest person to clean up a mess. It's about making damn sure that mess never ever happens to begin with.
And that's why this slide is so important. Just look at the language. We're shifting from response plan to prevention system. That's not just semantics, folks. That changes everything. It's the fundamental difference between being a follower, always running around putting out fires, and being a leader, who sees where the fires might start and removes the fuel before there's even a spark.
Okay, so why is this shift in thinking so incredibly critical? Why all the fuss? Well, it all boils down to three huge reasons. What I call the 3 pillars of safety. And believe me, the stakes here are way, way higher than just a puddle on the warehouse floor. We're talking about massive, foundational responsibilities. First up, the moral pillar. We have a fundamental duty to protect this planet, plain and simple. Then there's the legal side. We're talking about massive international environmental fines, the kind that can cripple a company overnight. And finally, the financial pillar. A single spill can lead to millions in losses, not to mention a damaged reputation that can take decades to rebuild, if ever. So you see, prevention isn't just best practice. It is absolutely essential for survival.
So the big question is, how do we actually build this flawless prevention system? The good news is, we don't have to start from scratch. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a world-renowned framework out there that's designed for exactly this: proactive environmental management.
And that framework is ISO 14001. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Some boring certificate you hang on a wall to impress auditors. But I want you to completely forget that. Think of it as a practical, hands-on operating system for leadership. It gives us a simple but incredibly powerful cycle to follow. And that cycle is plan, do, check, act. PDCA. It's this beautiful, elegant loop of continuous improvement. This little 4-step cycle, it's the backbone of pretty much any world-class safety system you'll ever see. So, let's break down how this actually works out in the real world, shall we? All right, let's get into it. This is where the theory hits the concrete floor. We're going to walk through each step of the PDCA cycle, step by step, and see how it really transforms a workplace, from just reacting to stuff to actually leading. Okay, step 1, plan. And listen, you can't do this from behind a desk. No way. You've got to get out there on the floor. You've got your safety data sheets, your SDSs, right? They're your treasure map to where all the risks are. Use them. But the most critical part, you have to talk to your people, the ones doing the work every day. I'll never forget this one site I visited. They had these expensive, top-of-line containment trays under empty drums. Meanwhile, the full drums were sitting on bare soil right next to them. That is a textbook planning failure. A manager in an office would never see that, but the guys on the ground, they knew. Next up is do. And this is all about education and practice. And I'm not talking about a 5-minute slideshow during induction. That's totally useless. I'm talking about hands-on, realistic mock emergency drills. You practice the contain and control procedure over and over and over again. Why? Because you want it to be automatic. When a real spill happens, and it might, you don't want your team panicking and trying to remember a procedure. You want them to act on pure muscle memory. They don't think, they just do. Now we're at the check stage, and this slide just perfectly lays out the difference between a safety officer and a safety leader. The reactive officer, they show up after the spill to investigate. They're always a step behind. But a proactive leader? They're using what we call active monitoring. They are constantly checking storage, checking labels, checking containment systems before anything has a chance to go wrong. That's the whole game right there, being one step ahead instead of one step behind.
And finally, we act. And maybe the single most powerful tool in this entire cycle is giving your entire team stop work authority. Think about what that means. It empowers every single worker, from the newest hire to the CEO, to halt an unsafe process if they see a risk. A leaking valve, a drum stored improperly, anything. They see it, they stop it. No questions asked. That, my friends, is a total game changer.
And part of acting is learning. When a near miss happens, and trust me, they will, you don't just patch the leak and move on. No, you dig deeper. You use tools like the 5 whys or a fishbone diagram to find the true root cause. And here's the key. You're not looking for a person to blame. You're looking for the flaw in your system that allowed that near miss to happen in the first place.
So, when you put all these pieces together, when you're constantly planning, doing, checking, and acting, something really amazing starts to happen. You stop just following a system of rules, and you start building something so much more powerful. A genuine culture of ownership.
And this right here, this is the end game. This is what you're striving for. It's that moment when safety stops being about enforcement from the top down and starts being about ownership from the ground up. When it's a shared value that every single person feels responsible for. That's when you know you've really, truly mastered this.
And it doesn't stop there. Looking ahead, technology is about to make this proactive approach even more powerful than we can imagine. We're already seeing AI-powered sensors, digital monitoring systems that can detect a tiny pressure drop in a pipeline miles away. We're talking about technology that lets you act before a single drop of anything ever hits the ground. It's incredible.
So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. I want you to take a hard look at your own workplace, your own systems. Is your system built to react? Is it just waiting for an alarm to go off with a spill kit ready to go? Or is it built to lead? Is it designed from the ground up to prevent that alarm from ever sounding in the first place? The choice really is yours.
Picture this, a massive industrial facility, late at night. You can hear that low, steady hum of machinery in the air. Everything's quiet. Everything looks totally normal. But you know it's in moments just like this, in the quiet, that disasters usually begin. Okay, let's get into it. Everything we're going to talk about today really hinges on this one core idea. Huge failures, they don't start with a big bang. No, they start with something tiny, something that gets overlooked. A drip, a sensor that's just a little bit off, a pressure reading that nobody does anything about. It's always the small stuff that snowballs into a catastrophe. So, how does something like this actually start? Let's break down the anatomy of a failure, literally second by second, and you'll see it's a story that unfolds not in some big, chaotic mess, but in a quiet, orderly, and, well, a deeply flawed sequence of events. Okay, just look at this timeline. At 3:47 a.m., everything's green across the board. But then, just 15 seconds later, a warning pops up, a little blinking amber light. Then it goes to solid red. Then you hear that flat electronic beep. And within just 1 minute of that first little digital flicker, we get a physical event. The first drop actually falls. The key here is that the system only reacted after the problem was already underway. So now, an alarm is blaring. The system has finally, officially declared a failure. And this is where the human element enters the picture. This is where we get to see what we all think is the perfect response. All of a sudden, a call just cracks over the radio. It's urgent, it's direct. There's a highly trained worker who was maybe resting just a moment ago who just snaps into action. This is the exact scenario they've been training for their whole career. And you watch them move with this incredible precision. Gloves snap on, goggles click into place. They check the respirator seal. The full splash suit is zipped up. Boots are secured. Spill kit is in hand. I mean, every single step is done perfectly, exactly by the book. This worker is doing everything right. And here is the entire point of this whole thing. This heroic, flawless response, it's actually the ultimate sign of a massive systemic failure. The fact that this worker has to put themselves in danger at all means the system has already failed them. It's a failure of philosophy, a philosophy that's all about cleaning up messes instead of preventing them from ever happening. All right, so let's go to the scene of the spill and see how this plays out. Because what a person can see with their own eyes and what advanced technology can see, well, they are two totally different realities. And this right here is the real core of the problem. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this contrast. On the left, you have what the human eye sees, a spreading pool of liquid, right? Some vapor coming off it, basically a mess that needs to be cleaned up. But on the right, the AI analysis sees this whole cascade of invisible data.
It knows the exact substance, it's estimating the volume, it's measuring the vapor concentration, and, this is the most critical part, it's assessing the risk. The human sees a puddle, the AI sees a high risk of groundwater contamination.
And this slide really gives you the full picture, that unseen data cascade. The system isn't just seeing a spill, it's identifying the chemical, it's calculating the volume in real time, it's assessing the vapor and its explosive limit, it's even mapping its path towards environmental risks like drains. See, an effective response isn't about bringing a mop, it's about processing all of these variables at once, which is something the naked eye just can't do.
So all of this brings us to a really fundamental shift in how we should be thinking. How do we move away from just reacting to failures and start actively engineering them out of existence? This is the whole concept of the last spill. It really boils down to two completely different cultures. A reactive culture, well, it prides itself on how well it cleans up spills. Its heroes are the responders. But a proactive culture, that's all about prediction and prevention. Success here is quiet. Success is a non-event. It's measured by the incidents that never, ever happened. Here's the textbook definition, and honestly, it's pretty powerful. Proactive safety isn't just a better response plan. It's a system that uses data to basically see into the future, to see that blinking amber light and neutralize the risk long before it ever has a chance to become a single drop on the floor. So the ultimate goal, the whole point of this technology and this philosophy, isn't about better splash suits or faster response teams. It's to make them completely unnecessary. It's to engineer a system so intelligent that the heroic response we saw earlier becomes a relic, something you'd see in a museum, from a less safe time. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. Whether we're talking about a chemical plant or really any complex system in our lives, is it designed to react to failure? Or is it intelligently designed to prevent that failure from ever happening in the first place? That, right there, is the difference between cleaning up the past and actually engineering a safer future.